Good morning. It's May 2nd, 2025, and this is the Daily Brief. My name is Lee. Let's get started. Today we'll be talking again about Europe, the Ukraine, the Middle East, China, the Western Pacific, and the United States. So in Europe today, it's all about the United Kingdom. Nigel Farage's Reform UK party achieved a significant victory by winning the Runcorn and Helsby parliamentary seat, narrowly defeating Labour by 6 votes. The win is part of a broader trend, with Reform UK poised to make substantial gains in local elections, potentially reshaping the political landscape in the United Kingdom. The fundamental problem, it seems to me, with all European politics at this point in time is the mix of population has changed so rapidly in recent years due to both legal and illegal immigration from the Middle East and North Africa. And so much in the way of public resources have been given to these new arrivals, many of which seem to be making no genuine effort to integrate into the existing society. This has caused the native Europeans and Englanders to push back against the political policies and the leadership that has allowed this to happen. The Labour Party is in turmoil. It's experiencing internal conflicts, notably over its net zero agenda, which has been criticized by former Prime Minister Tony Blair. These disputes are contributing to a decline in the party's popularity. The net zero agenda, according to Blair, is an irrational program because voters are being asked, and in many cases forced, to make serious personal sacrifices despite making a minimal difference to the environment. Isn't that really the whole problem with the climate change argument? The proof of change and the damage is so tenuous, and the change is so remote and disconnected from everyday life that it's difficult to justify the incredible current costs for a benefit in the future that is all but impossible to prove or guarantee. Now let's move on to the Ukraine. Russian forces have intensified their offensive in the Lyman and Seversk regions of Donetsk Oblast, establishing a bridgehead across to the Zherebets River and making tactical advances. Ukrainian forces report repelling several attacks, but the situation remains volatile. Ukrainian drone strikes in Kherson resulted in several deaths, while Russian attacks on Odessa killed at least 2 individuals. These incidents underscore the ongoing humanitarian toll in the conflict. The U.S.-Ukraine agreement on rare earth minerals was signed as a reconstruction investment agreement, aiming to bolster the Ukraine's economy amid the ongoing war. While this news is encouraging to non-Russian elements, the difficulty of implementing such an agreement are as yet unresolved and unclarified. The current approach by the Trump administration seems counterintuitive. Traditionally, peace talks after extended wartime conflict only really become possible when one side realizes that they cannot continue and must reach a deal. Clearly, this is not yet the case, as Russia still has significant economic and military resources to draw upon, and Ukraine is hopeful of continuing support from the United States and Europe. Unless one side or the other can be convinced that they are going to lose, they both remain hopeful of winning. It seems to me and many others that the better approach would be to offer a clear choice to Russia: immediate escalation of economic sanctions and a promise to Ukraine to not only continue supplying war material, but a promise to escalate the quantity and quality of such material. This approach is not without its own set of risks. However, this is the only language that Putin does seem to understand. Now turning to the Middle East. The Gaza crisis continues. Israeli military operations in Gaza have resulted in the deaths of at least 18 Palestinians over the past 24 hours. The UN has called for the lifting of Israel's blockade, citing a worsening humanitarian crisis marked by widespread hunger and looting. Reports of Gaza deaths are suffering from 2 problems: One is the lack of credibility, and the other is the lack of concern. Credibility issues relate to the known inflation of such reports by Hamas reports, and the simple fact that Gaza residents, when interviewed, are militantly anti-Jewish supporters of the Hamas mission. Until Gaza residents decry and reject the Hamas anti-Jewish, anti-Israel mission that they have, there will be a danger to Israel, and it will be difficult to justify the cessation of Israel's military actions in the Gaza region. Now to Iran. Iranian military officials are inspecting air defense systems in the Khuzestan province, indicating that preparations for potential U.S. or Israeli strikes on nuclear facilities are undergoing. These actions come amid stalled nuclear negotiations between Iran and the United States. It seems obvious to all that Iran is stalling, and it is very likely that they have accelerated their efforts to produce weapons-grade plutonium. It seems clear to me that the best course of action for the United States, Israel, and the Western world in general is to take out the nuclear production facilities and put an end to this global risk. Now, the consequences of such an action may be dire, but the current efforts are not working, and the risk of Iran having the bomb is simply too horrible for continued patience. Iran can hardly be a more cancerous agent for international peace and stability if the strikes occur, when you consider the trouble that they've caused in recent years. Now let's turn our attention to China. China has conducted large-scale military drills near Taiwan, signaling a potential blockade strategy. These exercises are viewed as a warning against Taiwanese independence movements. Having watched the China-Taiwan conflict escalate over the last 10 to 20 years, it's clear that China's grand plan is to gradually ratchet up the military pressure and their encroachments on Taiwan such that they become almost commonplace and diminish in the level of alarm created. Then, one day, what everyone views as just another exercise will suddenly become the real thing. No surprise there. The danger is difficult to manage for all parties. The single best way to handle this would be to pull the rug out from under the economic foundation of the PLA. The Chinese economy is what I'm talking about. This certainly seems to be what Trump is doing now. China, like the United States, depends on its economic engine to provide the public funds needed to grow and support a powerful military. By imposing tariffs on China, Trump has cut the economic foundation of China to the bone. With all large economic systems, the damage takes time to trickle up to the government decision to spend money on military needs. But in the case of China, the rapid rise in pain to the population will at least give China a major internal conflict with their population that they will have to deal with. Of course, the threat of China turning to nationalism as a way to control their population is a real threat. But left to their own devices, China seems to be on a steady path to war over Taiwan and or the South China Sea. It's just a matter of time. The U.S. and the Western Pacific Alliance should do all that it can in the meantime to divide the CCP's attention and undermine their economic base. Regarding trade negotiations, the U.S. has approached China to initiate talks on reducing tariffs, including those imposed by the Trump administration. China is considering the proposal, but insists that all existing tariffs must be lifted as a precondition to negotiations, like they will then truly negotiate without any pressure. Not likely. Again, this seems counterintuitive, since the reality is that the U.S. can much more easily absorb the increased cost of decoupling from China than China can absorb. But the original intent of allowing China into the World Trade Organization was to lessen tensions and dangers by cooperating with China versus initiating conflict. That works only to the point where China agrees to play fair with the rest of the world. Given China's history and current political positions and policies, the idea that we should be cooperating with China seems archaic at present. Now let's look to the Western Pacific. Joint military exercises between the United States, the Philippines, and Australian forces are being conducted with a simulated amphibious invasion, demonstrating enhanced military cooperation in the region. Now, Australia is going into submarine production. U.S. Senators Mark Kelly and Todd Young announced that Australia will begin building Virginia-class submarines, a move that is aimed at strengthening deterrence against China's maritime assertiveness in the Western Pacific. This will both increase overall U.S. shipbuilding capacity under the Ships for America Act and will provide much-needed economic and technological support for one of America's most important allies in the Western Pacific. Japan has proposed a one-theater defense concept, linking the East China Sea, the South China Sea, and the Korean Peninsula together. This has raised concerns in South Korea about regional security implications. There are two main concerns with this approach. First, that Japan will become linked to China as a primary military combatant in any conflict and thereby become a first strike target of China. And second, that the same issue would apply to Korea. This removes the ability of each nation to sort of dance around an upcoming conflict and avoid becoming the focus of a Chinese first strike. We have to remember how close these nations are, something that is easy to forget from a distance. And now to the United States. May Day protests occurred on May 1st with demonstrations opposing President Trump's policies on labor rights and immigration. The protests, according to the National Public Radio, reflect a growing domestic dissent against the administration's agenda. But we do all need to keep in mind that National Public Radio focuses on anything anti-Trump and negative and tries to make it a bigger deal than it is. Trump has announced plans to rename Veterans Day and call it Victory Day for World War I, stating that the United States needs to celebrate its victories. That's the news for the last 24 hours as of the morning of May 2nd. I hope you enjoyed. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy this content. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.